May we kindly resume our seats. Distinguished Second Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Leadership of Parliament, Clerk to Parliament, Members of Parliament, Members of the Parliamentary Service, distinguished invited guests, members of the diplomatic community, ladies and gentlemen. At a time when democracies across the world are increasingly polarized, the question before us is practical and urgent. How do we build consensus without compromising conviction? How do we design policies that are not driven by extremes, but grounded in evidence, inclusion, and national interest? This public lecture forms part of Parliament's broader effort to deepen engagement with the public, to demystify our work, and position Parliament not only as a lawmaking body, but also as a marketplace of ideas. Distinguished guests, my name is Eric Edem Agbana, Member of Parliament for Ketu North, and it's an honor to serve as the MC for today, as we officially commenced public lecture series under the auspices of the Clerk to Parliament. To begin this important event, I call on my colleague, Member of Parliament for Esunafo North, the Honorable Haruna Mohammed, to give us the opening prayer.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Edem. Please, if you don't hear me loud and clear, don't worry. It's 4 p.m. in the month of Ramadan, so you can just imagine. But in fact, even if I cough, Allah will listen, because this is a blessed month. Let's pray. La ilaha illallah wa la sharika lahu lahu mulku wa la kulli wa la kulli shay'in qadir. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Rahman rahim maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alaihim ghayril maghdubi 'alaihim waladdallin. Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Haruna Mohammed, for the prayer. Honorable members, before we proceed with the program, permit me to introduce or recognize the presence of some very distinguished personalities with us this afternoon. I begin with Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempe, former Member of Parliament for Menchia, former Minister of Energy, former Education Minister, and the 2024 running mate to Dr. Mahamadou Bawumia. Doc, once again, you are welcome. We appreciate your presence. We also have with us Mr. Gabi Asare Ochre Dako. He's the founder of the Africa Prosperity Network. He's here with us. We also have a representation from the leadership of the New Patriotic Party, Dr. Antoinette Tibu Dako. She is the Deputy General Secretary of the NPP. Forgive me for butchering the name. We also have the former MD for NIB, Mr. Alfred Thompson, with us. We have the leadership of Parliament here with us as well. For the minority side, we have the Deputy Minority Chief Whip, the one and only Honorable Habib, MP for Tolon. He's here with us. We also have the second Deputy Majority Whip, the Honorable Richard Achampong. We have many members of Parliament from both sides of the divide who are here to support the minority leader. You are all welcome. As the program progresses, I will recognize you. Thank you so much. Moving on, we welcome the Clerk to Parliament, Mr. Ebenezer Ahuma Jetro, to give us the welcome address.
I hope I got the name right this time.
Thank you very much, Adam, and good afternoon to leadership, very eminent persons here gathered, colleagues, members of the parliamentary service, of course, members of parliament properly acknowledged, the members of the press, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. Let me stand on the protocols laid out carefully by Honorable Edem Agbana, but of course recognize a few persons. Of course, indefatigable second deputy speaker, representing the speaker here, the Honorable Minority Leader, the Honorable Deputy Minority Whip, Honorable Deputy Majority Whip, our members of Parliament. Of course, I've already been chastised once by my bosom friend. Immediately I entered this auditorium in the person of Honorable Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempe. My own, the accolades have already been touted, but suffice it to state that he's been my brother, my bosom friend. We've been together, we've worked very hard, we've done things together. I hope you forgive me for what I regard as an unpardonable slip from my office. I know you have forgiven me. You know what I'm talking about. And I'll come over to the house to atone, find a way of atoning for my sins. That is just by the way between the two of us. So, it is a delight to be with you this afternoon for this very important discourse. This public lecture represents more than a formal gathering. It is a practical expression of democratic engagement. It reflects Parliament's sustained commitment under the Fourth Republic to deepen its relationship with the people and to create accessible platforms for dialogue on issues that shape our national development. Democracy does not thrive in isolation within constitutional texts. It grows through participation, informed debate, and accountability. Today's engagement exemplifies these principles. I wish to acknowledge the Public Affairs Subdivision for advancing Parliament's mandate to demystify its processes and bring citizens closer to legislative work. Their efforts reinforce transparency and enhance public understanding of how policy decisions are made and why they matter. Such initiatives are central to strengthening institutional legitimacy and public trust. The theme for this lecture, centrism, formulating policies for a growing democracy, is particularly timely. Ghana, like many democracies, is navigating a period of economic pressures, rapid social transformation, technological change, and heightened civic expectations, especially among young people. dynamics demand a policy approach that is measured, evidence-driven, and constitutionally grounded. Centrism, as framed for today's discussion, is not indecision, neutrality for convenience, or the mechanical splitting of differences. Rather, it is a disciplined commitment to principled pragmatism. It requires policymakers to interrogate evidence carefully, draw from diverse ideological traditions where appropriate, and to resist the pull of rigid partisan extremes. Complex challenges such as poverty alleviation, healthcare delivery, educational reforms, and economic transformation rarely yield to binary solutions. Effective policy formulation must therefore integrate competing perspectives while remaining faithful to constitutional values and long-term national interests. In a nation as diverse as Ghana, ethically, religiously, regionally, and socio-economically, centrist governance is not merely a philosophical preference. It is a practical necessity. Sustainable public policy must build consensus without silencing dissent. Balance fiscal realities with social equity and prioritize inclusive growth. It must ensure that development outcomes reflect the collective aspirations of all Ghanaians. Ultimately, today's lecture is an invitation to meaningfully dialogue. Dialogue characterized by intellectual honesty, respectful disagreement, and openness to alternative perspectives. This would definitely guarantee integrity of the discourse here. The goal is not uniformity of opinion, but a deeper understanding of how balanced, evidence-informed policy-making can support Ghana's democratic consolidation. As our democracy continues to evolve, its resilience will depend on sustained civic engagement, responsible leadership, and a shared commitment to the public good. It is my fervent hope and earnest expectation that participants leave this forum with a clearer appreciation of Parliament's role, a deeper understanding of centrism as a governing philosophy, and a renewed dedication to the responsibilities of democratic citizenship. May today's conversation be bold, honest, respectful, and ultimately secure for us and posterity the blessings of liberty, equality of opportunities, and prosperity. I thank you.
Thank you, the Clerk to Parliament, Mr. Ebenezer Ahuma Jetro. We have with us the second Deputy Minority Whip, the Honorable Jerry Ahmed Shaibu, MP for Wejagbawe. The next on the program is a remark from the majority leader and leader of government business. He's a distinguished legislator, an inspiration to many of us as young MPs. Let's welcome the Honorable Mahama Ayariga, Majority Leader.
I have to add that. Okay. Thank you very much. The Right Honorable Second Deputy Speaker, the Clerk of Parliament, my colleague, the Minority Leader, colleague members of Parliament who are here, and I see very senior friends of mine who have come to join us, and former members of this House who are here. I welcome all of you to this important function. But for the way people voted, someone would have been vice president. But maybe I would not have had the benefit of sitting with him in a room like this. So, my big brother, you're welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, friends from the media, this indeed is a momentous occasion. The Night Parliament has indeed built on the many gains of the previous Parliament of the Fourth Republic, and I'm very happy to be part of such great additions to our country's democracy. That's why I'm not just happy, but also honored to give these remarks as a precursor to the lecture that will be delivered by the Honorable Minority Leader at this maiden edition of the Public Affairs Subdivision's Public Lecture, aimed at demystifying the institutions of Parliament, bringing it closer to the people, and ultimately engendering effective citizen participation in our legislative process. Let me veer off a little from my speech. When I became the majority leader, the first thing that I did was to work with the Public Affairs Department to establish a television station for Parliament House. That's the first thing that I did. And because of that, proceedings are now live on national television. Across the country, everybody gets to watch proceedings live. They don't have to wait till evening, and then, after the news, City FM will report today in Parliament, and then give some highlights of what could have happened during that day. Now, citizens, when they are available, and even when they are busy in their offices, will just be watching their televisions, and then they'll be following debates in Parliament, how their issues are being addressed in Parliament. And that has indeed given a lot of attention to Parliament in recent times. But what it has also done is that when we finish proceedings, we tend not to have a lot of content. So we have to keep repeating and repeating and repeating the proceedings of the previous day. And then we keep repeating these interviews of members of Parliament. I'm sure people are bored of those interviews being repeated, every single day. And so we have to develop content. We have to develop content so that at all times there's something new in terms of what our television station is broadcasting. I find this initiative to have these lecture series as something that will go to assist our station to develop content that can be broadcast and continue to engage the public. I know some may think some may be thinking that centrism is just a fancy word for people who cannot make up their minds. Let us journey together through what centrism actually means, not in a political sense, but in the lived reality of our country. Ghana, because of the story of centrism, is in many ways the story of how we have governed ourselves. Understanding the left and the right. To understand centrism, we must first understand what it sits between. On one hand, on one end of the political spectrum, we have the left, center left, and far left. On the other hand, we have the right, center right, and then the far right. The political left, in its classical sense, believes in the active role of the state. It believes that inequality is not natural, it is structural. That if you are born poor, it is not simply because you did not work hard enough, it is because systems, institutions, and histories have stacked the odds against you. And therefore, it is the job of government to intervene, to redistribute wealth, to provide public services, to regulate markets, to protect workers, to ensure that every citizen has a floor beneath their feet below which they cannot fail. On the other side, the political right, in its classical sense, believes in the primacy of individual freedom and the power of the free market. It argues that when government tries to do too much, it does most things badly. It creates bureaucracy and stifles innovation and obstructs private enterprise. The right says, get the state out of the way, let businesses compete, let individuals make their own choices, let the market determine prices, let merit determine outcomes, and in the long run, the rising tide will lift all boats. This is the tradition that gave birth to privatization, deregulation, low-tax economies, entrepreneurship culture, and here in Ghana, it resonated in sentiments like, let the private sector lead, create the conditions for business to thrive, trust the Ghanaian entrepreneur. Both of these traditions have produced resolve. Both have also produced failures. The far left, taken to its extreme, has produced states that are bloated, corrupt, and repressive, where the government controls everything and citizens control nothing. The far right, taken to its extreme, has produced societies of savage inequality, where a handful of people own almost everything and the majority struggle to survive. This is where centrism becomes a mitigating factor. Centrism may sound cautious or even denote indecision. After all, political ideologies conventionally must pander to either the left or the right. That, after all, is what distinguishes socialism from capitalist, and it is what capitalism, and that is what, in conventional terms, political parties and their ideologies must show. So to some, perhaps, centrism becomes a convenient place to stand when one does not wish to offend either side. But I want to suggest that in the Ghanaian experience, centrism is none of those things. True centrism is the deliberate, principled decision to draw from both traditions, to take what works from the left and what works from the right, and to apply them not based on ideology, but based on evidence, context, and the actual needs of the people. A centrist government can support free market principles in one breath and defend robust public investments in the next, because it understands the reality is more complex than any single ideology can capture. It does not ask whether a policy it does not ask whether a policy is left or right, but interrogates whether the policy works, whether it improves the lives of the people, if it is just or sustainable. Center-left politics leans towards using the state to address inequality and provide social services, while still accepting the market as the primary engine of growth. Center-right politics leans towards trusting the market and limiting government interventions, while accepting that some regulations and some social provision is necessary. These two center positions, center left and center right, are closer to each other than their fringes would have you believe. And in many of the world's most successful democracies, governance alternates between these two centrist poles. The result is stability, growth, and progress. Now, what has been the Ghanaian experience of centrism? As Ghana is a fascinating case study in centrism, not because we deliberately designed it that way, but because our history, our culture, and our constitutional architecture have conspired to produce it naturally for us here in Ghana, in our political life. Centrism has even been a source of comfort. At this point, let me veer off from my speech and just indicate that when it comes to the debate about centrism, center right, center left, and all that, far right, far left, and all that, I find that our constitution is clear on what should be the political ideology of Ghana. And I have my senior lawyers in this room. If you go to the directive principles of state policy, the directive principles of state policy says that the directive principles of state policy contained in this chapter shall guide all citizens, Parliament, the President, the Judiciary, the Council of State, the Cabinet, political parties, and other bodies and persons in applying or interpreting this Constitution or any other law, and in taking and implementing any policy decision for the establishment of a just and free society. So the directive principle of state policy has predetermined the ideology of Ghana. And if you read through the provisions on economic objectives and social objectives, you will find out that, in fact, we don't even need to be engaged in a debate about whether we are left or we are right, because the Constitution has defined an ideology for us. And clearly, that ideology is centrism, which is that invest if you have to invest. Allow the private sector if you have to allow the private sector. But ultimately, do whatever it takes so that you can establish a just and free society in which people are enabled to benefit from governance. It is my considered opinion that since 1993, governments of different political traditions have come into office with strong convictions and clear mandates. For over 30 years now, power has alternated between the National Democratic Congress and the New Patriotic Party. And if you study their records in government, you will find something very interesting. Both parties, when they govern, end up governing from the center. The NDC, which traces its roots to a revolutionary tradition, has presided over market liberalization, private sector partnerships, and fiscal austerity when necessary. The NPP, which champions free enterprise, has expanded social protection programs, built public infrastructure, and intervened heavily in the economy when the situation demanded it. This is not hypocrisy. This is centrism in practice. This is what responsible governance looks like when you are no longer campaigning, but actually running a country with diverse needs, limited resources, and complex challenges. So the question we must confront is not whether centrism sounds attractive, but whether it can be used in addressing inequality, in managing our economy, in strengthening our institutions, and in restoring confidence in democratic leadership. In the Ghanaian context, I believe the answer lies first in our constitution. 1992 Constitution is not an ideological document. It does not belong to the left or the right. It is a carefully negotiated framework shaped by history, restraint, and hard experience. It disperses power, protects rights, and insists on accountability. That constitutional design is centrist in the most serious sense. And I read the directive principle of state policy to you, and I challenge everybody that we are not allowed to either be left or right. If we seek to run this country under this constitution, we must all be in the center. That's what the Constitution has dictated. That constitutional design is centrist in the most serious sense. It demands balance. It demands justification. It demands that power be exercised with reason rather than impulse. And that is what guides constitutional spirit. That is what guides constitutional spirit and should guide how we make policy. Centrist policy making does not begin with conclusions. It begins with questions. It asks what the evidence shows, what comparable societies have learned, and how proposed solutions will affect real people in real places, not in theory, but in practice. It requires the humility to revise policies that are not working, and the courage to say so publicly. So it requires the humility to revise policies that are not working, and the courage to say so publicly. In politics, that is not easy. But governance is not a test of stubbornness. It is a test of results. True centrism has a backbone. That is why when you promise cocoa farmers, 70% of the cocoa price, and world market price, slumps, and you are now earning only, 2,000 and a little bit above 2,000 from the world market price. It is not stubbornness that should determine. It's pragmatism, reality, and centrism that should determine. You have to be honest with the people and tell them that you are not able to pay them that price because the world market price dictates that you should gain less than what we originally promised you. So that is what it is. It is prepared to redistribute when justice requires it. It is prepared to regulate when the public interest demands it, and it is prepared to liberalize when growth and innovation depends on it. What matters is not where a policy sits on an ideological spectrum, but whether it improves the lived reality of the Ghanaian people. 32 years into the Fourth Republic, Ghana is still defining itself, still negotiating the balance between liberty and order, growth and equity, ambition and restraint. That negotiation is democracy. And Parliament is where that negotiation takes institutional form. That is what this lecture series is about. It is Parliament saying to the people of Ghana, we want to think out loud with you. We want you to understand how we reason, how we decide, and we want to hear how you reason too. To our distinguished speaker for today, the Honorable Minority Leader, I say the floor is yours, and we look forward to your insights. Let us have a frank and deep conversation on how our policies are posited and how they affect our people. As law and policy makers, it is our duty to hold these types of conversations with the people whose mandate we have. And at the end of this day, let's leave here a little more equipped to build Ghana, the Ghana we all deserve. Thank you, and may God bless our homeland, Ghana.
Thank you to the Majority Leader, the Honorable Mahama Ayariga. I wish I had the power to ask whether or not the fantastic cocoa calculation was also part of the statement admitted, but I do not have that power, so I will not go there. Honorable members, distinguished guests, we also have with us the former Member of Parliament for Yendi, Alhaji Dr. Farouk Aliu Mahama. I will recognize many more former MPs and other guests as and when they bring it to my attention. We'll take some short musical interlude. To do that, I invite the cultural performance by the Ebibi Groma group, a brief one. Thank you so much for that beautiful performance. We may have to investigate who conspired to get them to sing some of minority leaders' favorite songs. I know, but for the fact that he is the keynote speaker, he would have joined them on the dancing floor with his Agbaja dance. Thank you, Ebibi Groma Group, for that beautiful performance. Distinguished guests, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to another important part of the program. It is time to hear from the main speaker for today. But I do not consider myself worthy enough to introduce him. So I will call on a senior brother, a senior in Parliament, a young man who is the ranking member on the Youth and Sports Committee. He's a member of the Economy and Development Committee. He was a member of the Education Committee in the 8th Parliament. He is the Member of Parliament for the Old Tafo constituency, the Honorable Lawyer Vincent Eko Asefua. And while he walks up here, let me also say that the Vincent you see today is because of the mentorship of the likes of Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh. Thank you so much, Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh, for mentoring this young man. Vincent, kindly introduce the main speaker.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Adam Agbana. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular honor and privilege to introduce to you a man whose name has become synonymous with strategic leadership, eloquence, and dedicated public service in Ghana's democratic journey. He is a legal luminary, an accomplished legislator, entrepreneur, and a strategic leader with over a decade of active engagement in parliamentary business, underpinned by an exceptional academic and legal foundation. Born on the 27th of May 1978, his educational journey began at STC Demonstration Primary and Junior High School, where he wrote his BEc in August 1994. He advanced to the prestigious St. Augustine's College, Cape Coast, where he completed his SSSC in December 1997. He then crossed continents to pursue law at the University of Buckingham in the United Kingdom, where he earned an LLB with management. Following this, he trained at the Ghana School of Law, obtaining his professional law certificate, and was subsequently called to the bar. To broaden his horizon, he pursued further studies in MA in International Politics and Security at the University of Bradford. He also pursued a postgraduate studies in leadership and governance at the prestigious Said Business School, University of Oxford. He was elected Member of Parliament for Afenyo constituency in 2012 on the ticket of the New Patriotic Party. He has since served with distinction in parliamentary leadership, first as Deputy Majority Leader, then as Majority Leader in the 8th Parliament, and currently as Mighty Minority Leader. Within Parliament, he has been a key voice on influential committees such as Defense and Interior, Finance and Public Accounts. He currently serves as a ranking member on both the Appointment Committee and the Business Committee, where his legal acumen and rich parliamentary experience continue to shape national policy and governance. His distinguished public service includes serving as board chairman of the Ghana Water Company, the Road Fund, and the Electricity Company of Ghana. On the international stage, he currently serves as the 3rd Deputy Speaker at the ECOWAS Parliament, where he contributes to advancing regional cooperation, governance, and development. At the constituency level, he has championed the transformative policy known as the Afenyo Dream, a vision rooted in placing the people at the very heart of development. This people-centered agenda is guided by 4 core principles. 1, security for the people. 2, quality education for the people. 3, better healthcare delivery for the people. And last but not the least, private sector development. He was conferred with the traditional title by the Afenyo Traditional Council as the Osahene of Afenyo Traditional Area, in recognition of his exemplary leadership, commitment to community development, and dedication to preserving the rich cultural heritage of the Afenyo people. Beyond politics, he is the head of chambers at Afenyo Markin, Okuntu and Associates, with extensive expertise in financial crimes, security, human rights, and constitutional law. He is a successful entrepreneur, and above all, a servant leader whose dedication to public service is truly worth emulating. He is married to Mrs. Diane Frimpoma Markin. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me. Welcome Osahene Alexander Kwamena Afenyo Markin, the leader of the mighty minority. Thank you so much.
Meka bacheche vielo, Toboli. Meka bacheche vielo, Toboli. Meka ble anyeji, Toboli. Meka nyo anyeji, Toboli. Meka favile zamenamo, Meka favile zamenamo. Nale na hope la siona blo, de vielo, Toboli. Meka bacheche vielo, Toboli. Meka bacheche vielo, Toboli. Nega gle anyeji, Toboli. Nega nyo anyeji, Toboli. Mega favile zamenamo, Mega favile zamenamo. Nade na hope la siona blo, de vielo, Toboli. Mega favile zamenamo, Mega favile zamenamo. De vielo, Toboli. Toboli, Toboli, Toboli. Mega family zamenamo, nade na hope la siona blo, de vielo, Toboli. Mega family.
Thank you very much. Second Deputy Speaker and Chairman of this occasion, Majority Leader and Leader of Government Business, Clerk to Parliament, colleagues in leadership, our respected former senior colleague, Dr. Matthew Opoku-Prempeh, Head of Africa Prosperity Network, Mr. Gabi Asare-Ochidako, colleague members of Parliament, representatives of other political parties, specifically present, as I can see, Deputy General Secretary of the MPP, Mrs. Tibudako, directors of Parliament, members from the civic society, the media, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first thank the Clerk to Parliament for this initiative and for giving me the opportunity to do the needful as it maiden lecture. Chairman, please permit me to make two important acknowledgements, as they are very essential because we have students in this auditorium. Back in 2012, as a young candidate in my constituency, it took the Director of Elections to train me and prepare me with his own manual on how to conduct my campaign and win election. I followed that tutorial notes as if he was a prophet. On the D-Day, the realities were that I had to go by the tutorial notes, and I won. Came to Parliament, he held my hand and never gave up on me, even in difficult times. And I'm honored that today, even in his tight schedule, he's here. Dr. Matthew Opoku-Prempeh, I'm grateful. And two, Gabi Asare-Ochidako, who also never gave up on me as a young legislator and make sure I learned the rules on communication and studied hard
and he never hesitated to correct me, even when I got it wrong. I'm happy he's here. Not the least, our own student leader. He didn't promise me, but I heard that he will be here to listen to what his boy can do. Dr. Amin Adna. We were at Kivas together. We were his boys. And he's here. He calls me his leader. I call him my boss. Colleagues, thank you for having time to be part of this important program titled Centrism, Formulating Policies for a Growing Democracy. We are in a house of a giant. On the 7th of January 1993, Ghana held its breath. A nation worried by decades of coup, proscription, and broken promises stood at the fragile edge of a new democratic dawn. The air was heavy with doubts. The wounds of history were still fresh. Many wondered whether this latest experiment in constitutional rule would endure, or whether it would falter under the weight of mistrust and memory. Into that chamber stepped Justice Daniel Francis Annan. He lifted the speaker's gavel with calm, deliberate resolve. Before him sat a house alive with tension, suspicion, and untested loyalties. Around him stood a country anxious yet hopeful. In that defining moment, he did not merely preside over proceedings, he steadied a republic. Today, I want to talk to you about centrism in the very auditorium named after him in his memory. I'm going to take you through what it is, where it comes from, and why it matters desperately for Ghana right now, and what happens to a nation when we abandon its principles in favor of extremes, slogans, and political theater. Let me thank the majority leader, Honorable Mahama Yerga, for doing the teaser. What he doesn't know is that I admire him so much. But also remind him that when the market dictates, the state must intervene. So the producer price of cocoa must never be reduced. The state should have intervened. Ladies and gentlemen, before we ascend to the heights of policy and philosophy, I need to bring you back down to earth. I need to introduce to you two women whose stories this nation has not yet found courage to truly hear. Somewhere in Ghana's north, in a village whose name you will not find on a tourist map, a girl was born. Let us call her by her rightful name, Fati. Fati grew up surrounded by the love that was rich and resources that were scarce. She watched her mother work the land. She watched her father dream of a better life. And somewhere in that red dusted courtyard, beneath a sky so wide and blue it hurt to look at, Fati made herself a quiet promise. I will go. I will find something better. I will make my family proud. And so, like thousands before her, Fati came to Accra. She came with a fire in her chest and hope in her hands. She believed, as our constitution promises, as our politicians swear at every rally, that Ghana is a land of opportunity. She believed the system would meet her halfway. It did not. Today, Fati is barely 17 years old, and already life has taken more than that it has given her. She works as a kitchen assistant, a destitute, hard-laboring hand in one of Accra's Wache kitchens. She wakes before the sun. She lifts and scrubs and carries and cleans in heat that will break a stronger spirit. She earns barely enough to survive. No safety net, no social protection, no pathway to a skill, a certificate, a life with dignity. And Fati is pregnant. Barely 17, carrying a new life in her womb, a child whose future she cannot afford to imagine, even as she refuses to stop praying for it. Is this a promise of our democracy? Is this what we meant when we said, quote, development in freedom? Hold Fati in your heart as we continue. Do not let her go. Because every policy we discuss today, every government we judge, we must judge it through her eyes. Now let me take you beyond our shores. For Ghana's pain does not stop at the water's edge. Picture a young Ghanaian mother. Her name, Faustina Yeli Fasiu. We know her story, not because we stood by her side, not because we witnessed her final moments, but because in some quiet, unspoken corner of our hearts, we all feared becoming her. She looked at this country. She looked at her daughter. She weighed the cost of staying against the terror of the sea, and she chose the sea. She stepped onto the rickety, overcrowded vessel in the cold darkness, and she prayed that the Mediterranean would be merciful. It was not. The boat capsized. The cold water swallowed her whole. In her final moments, perhaps she thought of Ghana. Perhaps she thought of a little child. Perhaps she whispered a prayer that had no time to finish. She left behind her daughter, barely 4 years old, clinging to the wreckage in the great sea, rescued by strangers. Her photograph circled the globe as thousands searched desperately for her family, her roots, and her hope. To this day, I do not know if that child has been found. She drifts in some limbo between tragedy and testimony as a haunting question to every leader, every lawmaker, every citizen of this republic. What must we build so that no Ghanaian mother ever again feels that the sea is safer than her own country? These two women, Fati and the nameless mother in the Mediterranean, are not statistics. They are the heartbeat of why we are here today. Their wise centrism is not merely a political philosophy, it is a moral imperative. This afternoon, I am particularly heartened by the diversity of this audience that are here to listen to me. Civic activists, students, parliamentarians, community voices, and everyday Ghanaian who represent the very heartbeat of our democracy. This is a deliberate national conversation designed to demystify the inner workings of Parliament, a sacred space where the will of the people is translated into laws that shape our shared future. The democracy we face, ladies and gentlemen, colleague members of Parliament, at a time when political discourse across the globe is increasingly defined by polarization, mistrust, and ideological rigidity, the call to reflect seriously on the role of the political center is both intellectually and politically urgent. Democracies today are not collapsing primarily because of external invasion. They are fraying from within. The tone of public debate has hardened. Compromise is calculated as betrayal. Moderation is misrepresented as weakness. Yet history teaches us that durable democratic progress has seldom been the product of extremes. It has more often been the achievement of those who could build bridges across differences. every growing democracy eventually reaches a defining moment. The question shifts from whether democracy can survive to whether democracy can deliver. Our journey as a country. Ghana's Fourth Republic, established in 1992, has experienced consistent democratic governance marked by stability, constitutionalism, and institutional continuity. As we have been told already by the majority leader, power has alternated peacefully between the New Patriotic Party and the National Democratic Congress. Institutions have strengthened, parliamentary oversight has deepened, judicial independence has been tested and upheld. What is particularly instructive is that successive governments, regardless of party, have often found centrist ground on critical issues. We have pursued macroeconomic stability, fiscal discipline, inflation control, and debt sustainability when evidence demanded it, even when such policies were politically difficult. We have combined market-based economic management with social intervention programs. Private sector growth has been encouraged alongside significant public investment in education, health, and infrastructure. Fiscal discipline has coexisted with targeted support for vulnerable populations. These policy choices demonstrate that Ghana's democratic governance has not been driven by ideological extremes. Policy formulation has largely been guided by moderation, pragmatism, and national consensus. Now let's turn to the internal landscape, the center-left and the center-right. Indeed, Ghana's democratic governance is shaped by two prominent political ideologies, the center-left and the center-right. Each ideology represents a coherent philosophical and political framework that informs party policies, governance priorities, and national debates. The center-left in Ghana is associated with the National Democratic Congress. This NDC traces its origins to the era of Armed Forces Revolutionary Council and the subsequent Provisional National Defense Council led by Jerry John Rawlings in the early 80s. This political ideology emphasizes social justice, equity, and the role of the state in addressing inequalities. It advocates for an active government that invests in public services, promotes inclusive development, redistribute income through progressive policies, protect workers and consumers through regulation, and ensure that the benefits of economic growth are broadly shared. The New Patriotic Party, the MPP, of which I'm proudly a member, on the other hand, traces its ideological foundation from the Dankwa Dombo Buzia tradition. The center-right in Ghana is associated with this political tradition. This political philosophy encapsulates individual liberty, private enterprise, limited government intervention, market-driven solutions. It prioritizes personal responsibility, protection of property rights, and economic efficiency, advocating for policies that encourage entrepreneurship, attract investment, and promote sustainable growth. Now let us try and understand centrism, its history, meaning, and foundations. The historical origins of centrism trace its roots to a familiar center-right ideological spectrum in modern origins to seating arrangement of the French National Assembly in 1789. Those who supported the monarchy sat to the right of the presiding officer. Those who favored radical reform sat to the left. From this historical accident grew one of the most durable organizing framework in modern politics. The left, broadly speaking, has historically championed equality, collective welfare, state intervention, and protection of marginalized groups. The right has historically prioritized individual liberty, free markets, tradition, and limited government. Centrism emerged from the lived experience of societies that grappled with ideological extremes. History shows that rigid adherence to any single political doctrine often produced unintended consequences. Excessive state-stifled initiative and efficiency, while unchecked market dominance, deepen inequality and social exclusion. Over time, democratic systems learn that governance requires balance. Centrism, therefore, developed as a practical response to these lessons. It draws from multiple traditions, selected policies not because they fit a rigid ideological mold, but because they address real challenges effectively. Centrism is grounded in realism. It accepts complexity. It recognizes that society evolves and policies must evolve with them. Centrism is not the arithmetic midpoint between left and right. It is a distinct political tradition with its own philosophical commitments, its own internal debate, and its own evolving relationship with power. It draws selectively from both the left and the right, rejecting what it regards as the excesses of each, while synthesizing the most defensible element of both. Authentic centrism is anchored in three foundational pillars. The first is balance. This is a recognition of the competing values: liberty, equality, efficiency, fairness, individual rights, and collective responsibilities, and that they must be held in tension rather than resolved by the triumph of one over the other. As Aristotle taught in his concept of the, quote, golden mean, end quote, virtues lies not in excess, but in equilibrium. The second pillar is evidence. Centrism grounds public policy in research, data, and measurable outcomes rather than ideological loyalty. Centrist policy makers ask not, does this fit my doctrine? But they ask, what works best in this context at this time for the greatest number of people? Third, the pillar is inclusion. Centrism ensures that diverse voices shape the national conversation and that solutions expand the circle of benefit rather than reward one group at the expense of another. Centrism is disciplined governance. It is intellectual humility to recognize that no single political tradition possesses a monopoly on wisdom. It is a moral resolve to place national interest above partisan gain. Extremes may excite, but balance builds a nation. What unites the center left and the center right, Honorable Chairman, I beg to submit, despite these differences, is a shared commitment to constitutional rule, electoral legitimacy, the rejection of political violence, the protection of civil liberties, and the defense of pluralism. It is the shared foundation, more than any specific policy position, that defines the centrist tradition and distinguishes it from the illiberal extremes on both sides. As third Deputy Speaker of ECOWAS Parliament, I have seen firsthand the consequences when these shared commitments erode. In part of West Africa, unconstitutional changes of government have disrupted democratic trajectories. Military interventions, often justified as corrective measures, ultimately undermine long-term institutional development. The center must therefore serve as the guardian of constitutional continuity. I must submit that the center left and the center right have their limits as ideologies. While ideology offers guidance, rigid adherence to it can become a constraint, especially in a growing democracy. Societies are complex. Economic conditions change. Social needs evolve. External shocks such as global economic downturns, public health crisis, or supply chain disruptions demand flexible responses. In such circumstances, policies driven purely by ideological loyalty risk becoming disconnected from reality. A center-left approach, if pursued without moderation, may place unsustainable pressure on public finances. A center-right approach, if applied rigidly, may widen inequality or weaken social cohesion. This is where the limits of ideology become apparent. Effective policy making requires more than philosophical consistency. It requires judgment, balance, and responsiveness to contexts. Why centrism matter in Ghana? Honorable Chairman, colleagues in leadership, members of parliament here present, ladies and gentlemen, I submit that as a growing democracy, the stakes could not be higher. We face complex challenges: youth unemployment, climate vulnerability, digital transformation, ECOWAS integration, and global economic volatility. No single ideology holds all the solutions. Centrism encourages innovation. It blends market incentives with social investment, private initiative with public oversight, growth with equity. A growing democracy like ours must guard against two dangers. The first is ideological rigidity, which paralyzes decision making. The second is opportunistic populism, which sacrifices long-term national interests for short-term applause. Centrism charts a disciplined course between these two extremes. Now, the role of parliament in a centrist policy-making democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, in every constitutional democracy influenced by the Westminster tradition like ours, Parliament occupies a unique space. It is where competing visions are debated, contested, refined, and ultimately synthesized into law. Parliament plays a central role in translating centrist principles into policy outcomes. Through committee work, debates, and oversight, Parliament ensures that legislation reflects a broad range of perspectives. Committees examine evidence, hear from experts, and engage the stakeholders. This process naturally moderates extreme positions and promotes balanced solutions. Lawmaking becomes an exercise in consensus building rather than ideological confrontation. Oversight, when conducted responsibly, strengthens governance without undermining it. This is a hallmark of centrist democratic practice. Now let's turn to centrism and policy formulation, the centrist approach to policy making. Centrist policy making begins with a rejection of ideological determinism. Rather than deriving policy prescriptions from first principles and applying them uniformly regarding of context, centrist policymakers approach each challenge empirically. They ask what the evidence shows, what has worked in comparative contexts, what the likely trade-offs are, and how different groups of citizens will be affected. This empirical orientation is one of centrism's genuine strengths, and it has produced some of the most durable, and effective policy innovations of the modern era. The mixed economy model and that defined much of post-war development, combining market mechanisms with state investment and regulation, was not an accident. It was a result of deliberate centrist negotiation between labor and capital, between growth and equity, and between efficiency and justice. Now let me turn to economic policy under centrism. In economic policy, centrism embraces the mixed economy model. Centrist government have been associated with macroeconomic stability, prudent fiscal management, investment in human capital through education and healthcare, and the construction of social safety nets. These nets protect citizens from the worst consequences of economic disruption without creating disincentives to work and enterprise. A centrist economic response requires three commitments. The first is macroeconomic stability. This means inflation control, prudent borrowing aligned with productivity, and transparent fiscal management. The center-right tradition insists that sustainable social policy must be built on sustainable economic foundations. Deficit finance without discipline eventually punish the very citizen they aim to protect. The second commitment is growth with inclusion. This requires investment in education, digital infrastructure, agriculture modernization, and industrialization. At the same time, centrism recognizes that market alone cannot address structural inequality. Investment in human capital through free senior higher education, technical training, healthcare expansion are not acts of charity. They are strategic investment in national productivity. The third commitment is social protection. This means targeted intervention for the most vulnerable, ensuring that reform does not disproportionately burden the poor. Now let me turn to the social policy. In social policy, centrism has generally sought to expand access to education, healthcare, and social protection, while maintaining fiscal sustainability of these systems. Centrist governments have often been the architect of universal healthcare systems, public pension schemes, and compulsory education frameworks. These frameworks have transformed the life chances of millions. At the same time, centrist social policy must confront its limitations. It has sometimes been criticized for moving too slowly on questions of structural inequality, for prioritizing administrative efficiency over genuine transformation, and for failing to adequately address the systemic barriers faced by marginalized communities. These are serious charges that require honest engagement. Now let me turn to our beloved Constitution and the architecture of centrism. Again, I thank the majority leader for a good teaser on the relevant portions of the Constitution. Honorable Chairman, if we are to speak seriously about centrism as a governing philosophy for Ghana, we must look not only at party manifestos and political traditions, we must look at the 1992 Constitution itself. Because whether we have fully recognized it or not, Ghana's Constitution is structurally centrist. It does not adopt ideological extremes. It does not entrench rigid economic dogma. It does not privilege class struggle over liberty, nor liberty over social justice. Instead, it deliberately and carefully balances competing values, holding them in creative tension, refusing to let either side of the equation swallow the other. Let us begin where the Constitution begins. The preamble itself, where the moral architecture of this republic is set. It says, the people of Ghana, they declare that we establish this Constitution to secure, quote, the blessings of liberty, equality of opportunity, and prosperity, unquote. Not liberty alone, not equality alone, not prosperity alone, liberty, equality of opportunity, and prosperity all together. So from this, it is obvious that the framers understood that each of these values, pursued in isolation, collapses in its own tyranny. Liberty without equality of opportunity breeds exclusion, where freedom exists on paper but belongs in practice only to the already privileged. Equality without liberty breeds repression, the suffocating sameness of the authoritarian state. And prosperity without justice breeds the instability that has torn nations apart, where a few grow fabulously wealthy while the many, like Fatih in a Wache kitchen, are left wondering whether this republic was ever truly meant for them. The Constitution does not choose between these values. It harmonizes them. And that harmonization is the constitutional definition of centrism. I so submit. Second Deputy Speaker Chair, the preamble further commits the Republic to the following: freedom, justice, probity, and accountability.